if you're ready to kick off.
Sounds great. All right. Thank you, Jen. So, yeah, basically, thank you again for joining. If you weren't here in those first couple of minutes, you are in our TextExpander Path to Power user for healthcare webinar. So, again, I'm your host, and Jen is going to be my lovely co host today. This webinar lasts about 60 minutes as far as the content. We do leave an additional 15 minutes towards the end for questions. And if you need to hop to another commitment, so if you're able to stay for that, great, no worries. But if you do have questions, Jennifer has covered this already, but just to reiterate it, if you have any questions while I am talking and training, definitely use that chat box. And so we'll be able to answer any questions. I'll stop a lot as well and just make sure that nothing important has come in, see if I need to repeat anything. This is meant to be interactive, so don't be shy. If I'm going too fast, also just put that in the chat. So like any sort of feedback is welcome. So yeah, if I can't answer it in the moment while I'm sharing my screen, I will. And anything that's better to wait till the end, we'll just answer those at the very end. So, jumping in, we always like to support you with a lot of TextExpander resources and really highlight where you can get help aside from joining these webinars. So, if you ever have any technical questions specifically, you can head to our learning center. So all of these things are linked here. If you want to screenshot this, click on them. I guess you couldn't click on them, but Jennifer is going to actually drop these links in the chat so you can click on them and bookmark them later. That's definitely more efficient. But yeah, so the learning center is great if you want to learn more. So maybe you are the type of person who likes to self-serve and kind of look for answers on your own. Feel free to peruse our different articles there. And there's also a link to contact support on that page. So they're a wonderful resource, particularly if you're having technical issues or have technical related questions. Obviously, there's our webinar page, and there is also the public groups. We will look a bit more at public groups later on today in the webinar. So like I said, this will last about an hour. We'll have more time at the end for questions, but my goal today is just to show you some more advanced features that you can use that possibly you're not already using or taking advantage of just yet, to really make the most out of TextExpander. So even if you've used us for a while, Jennifer and I can pretty confidently attest to the fact that there is always something more to learn. There's a lot of little hidden tips and tricks in there, and surprisingly enough, she and I still learn little things here and there. So we are experts, but there's truly always something more to learn with this app. So if you are brand new, I do encourage you to still follow along. I'm sure you are a fast learner. However, if you find that some things are going over your head or it is a little too fast paced for you, I do encourage you to join our next TextExpander 101 webinar. That'll just help you get a better idea of the basics and establish a solid foundation of the product knowledge before you get to some more advanced stuff. If you don't want to wait until the next live one, we have a lot of, so on that link she dropped, it should say textexpander.com/webinar. So you'll find on that page that we have recordings of that training already if you just wanted to watch the video, and feel free to email us afterwards with any questions. So yeah, mainly today, we're going to create some advanced snippets that are specific to healthcare related topics or examples. So the use cases that I go through, the examples that I give, likely will not reflect exactly what you do in your daily workflow. As much as I'd love to be able to do that, that would be really hard for me to replicate those things exactly. So really what I'm trying to do is inspire you to get really creative with the snippets of your own once you understand the feature functionality and just feel really confident with building things and navigating the apps. And you can kind of go from there and create things based on your own workflow. So to make the most out of our time today, I also encourage you to open up your TextExpander desktop app, and you can follow along, especially if you're the type of person who learns by doing. And you can also open up like a blank Google Doc, maybe a notepad, if you want to see the snippet expansion in action, or you can even, since you actually have access to an EMR likely, and I don't, you can even open up what might be just a blank note in your EMR if you want to practice some of this stuff and expand it there. Jen and I are also at this point going to go ahead and turn our cameras off because it's going to give you more real estate space on your screen. And instead of watching my hands move around as I am talking, hopefully I'll distract you less and you can kind of focus better with what is happening on my screen. Okay, so let's jump in. We've kind of got our overview here. So I am going to just have my TextExpander app here. Everything look good with this, Jen? You can see this, right?
I can, yep.
Okay, perfect. If you've heard a little phrase we use often, we always say that TextExpander is great for storing and sharing and retrieving information. So, specifically on that storing part, really take advantage of thinking of this app as a repository of information. So, even some of the small stuff that you might not realize that you are repeatedly typing, we know that your time is super valuable, and what we really want is for you to spend less time copying and pasting. So try to think of any tidbit of information that you are frequently using or sharing with others and turn that into a snippet. So you'll notice that I have here a snippet group that is called My Information. And it's basically just filled with some small tidbits of information about me. And don't forget, if you're a little bit unfamiliar with some of the TextExpander terminology, a snippet group is like a folder of how you organize your content. So, really, we love to kind of stress that the best practice here is to create these groups, or again, folders, very granularly and specifically based on your specific workflows. You don't have to overcomplicate it, but we definitely encourage you to be intentional with this. And the main thing is really try not to create or treat one group that is like a big bucket or a catch-all for all of your work and just things aren't even related to each other, all living in the same group. Okay, so when you want to add a new group, you can do that by selecting this new group button in the top right-hand corner of this far left pane of the app. And the group settings will open up to the right. And essentially, I will just name this for later. So oncology notes. I'm going to come back to this, but looking at that My Snippets group, I actually have a couple of snippets that could live in this group that are a better fit. So again, really trying to stress that organization piece. If you do notice that some of your snippets, which snippets are again, you might be familiar with thinking of those as different templates. So if you find that some of those snippets could fit better in a different group, a little power user trick that you can do is to actually drag and drop them over to your new group or somewhere else if you're reorganizing. So I have a different group here called My Snippets, and I have my info with my job title and my full name. So I could actually just select this and drag and drop it to the My Information group like that. All right, so you see pretty seamlessly, they are now living in a more appropriate group for what that content is for. Okay, so another great idea for snippets in a group like My Information is to add your email and your phone number. If you haven't done this already, it's something that you are likely typing out a lot. So I'm actually, since this is an advanced webinar, the main thing I want to show you here is a cool coding trick that will allow you to format these properly so that they are clickable. Okay, so we're in the My Information group. I'm going to add a new snippet, which is this plus icon here. All right, and then my content editor should open up to the right. So if you are following along, one thing that's really important here is that your content type does need to be set to formatted text and pictures. If you're set to plain text, you'll watch the difference here because I need to be able to add a hyperlink here with this chain link icon. And if it is set to plain text, you do not have that option. So just never forget that the formatted text and pictures option is going to give you more enriched features to kind of customize your snippet. Okay, so in the content editor, I'll just place my cursor here at the top, and I'm going to go back to that chain link icon, which is to insert a URL. A dialog box should appear for you here with a URL and an optional text field. So this is where it gets fun. So in the URL field, so at this first field here, I am going to put a little bit of code here that basically makes my email address clickable. It's going to format it properly so that someone can actually click on that directly and send you an email. It's not going to be just simply written out in plain text. So that is going to be mail to with a colon after. Don't put any extra spaces or special characters, other than what you see here. And then I'll put my email address exactly as it should be written. And then in the optional text field, this is where you put your email address as you need it to display. You're just going to basically type it out as usual so it appears like an email address. You don't need the little coding portion in both fields. So in this part, I just put Ariel at textexpander.com and select OK. So you'll see that now my email address is formatted as more of a rich text. And if I were to insert this in an email signature or expand my snippet to a patient in your case, they would be able to contact me or maybe my office or, whatever I'm kind of linking them to more easily. And just to kind of show you the difference is this is just what it would look like if you didn't use that bit of code. It would just be a very plain text snippet that someone couldn't use to contact you as easily. Okay. We will just want to finish this off with a label and an abbreviation. So again, just really trying to encourage you guys to stay really organized. You will really want to follow some naming conventions and patterns here. So you'll notice this is a My Information group. That's the kind of snippets that I'm putting in this group. And everything else I have here in the label starts with My Info. We'll learn more about searchability later and it'll be kind of full circle, but when you are labeling things properly, it'll really help you find what you need later on, and especially if you are creating these things for a team of people who also need to find this information. So I'll put my info and then I'll put email address. And I'm also going to follow some naming conventions with my abbreviation. So you'll notice these are just start with my and then whatever the kind of information is. So I'll put my email. Okay. And so we can do the same thing for a phone number. So maybe, you have an office number, maybe you want to put your personal phone number. It really just depends on what you are wanting to do. But essentially, we are going to do the same thing where you're able to make that phone number clickable. So an example of this is a patient of yours could be opening up maybe an email or some sort of communication from you from their phone. And if you're encouraging them to give you a follow-up call, or maybe they need to call your office to schedule an appointment, I can think of a lot of different scenarios here. But it's going to make it a lot easier for them to do that because especially if they're opening it from their phone, they can simply click on that number. It's going to automatically open up the dialer on their phone and they'll be able to call you a lot easier. Okay, so similar process. I'm going to just add a new snippet. It is a formatted text and picture snippet. I'm going to have the chain link icon here. And in this portion, again, remember the coding trick for the email was mail to colon. For this one, it's TL colon. And then after that, you need to enter the phone number with no extra spaces or special characters. So I'll just put 917-3389. And in the optional text field, this is how you want your phone number to actually display. So I could put parentheses, dashes. At this point, you can put any special characters that you want. So I might put 901-487-3386. Okay, so as you see, it formats as a clickable link. We'll just label this as well, following the same patterns. So maybe this is office phone, for example, and then I put my phone. Or any label of abbreviation of your choice. These are just some examples. Okay. Any questions, Jen, about what we've covered so far?
No questions yet. Everything's looking great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, just to kind of also finish this off, something we'll come back to as well and use in our next example is one thing that I've seen to be very beneficial in this industry is to add a snippet that particularly includes all of your medical license credentials. This is something that you're likely referencing or sharing often, including in certain documentation. So it's really helpful to create a snippet like this. So I already have one created. It's called My License. Again, we'll use this later on. This is obviously Jane Doe. This is not a real person, but the rest of this is something very similar to what I've seen a healthcare client use before. And I will also show you how beneficial this could be when everyone on your team creates one of their own, and then you can use this with shared documentation. And so, yeah, I think I've seen other people basically have what they call like a medical like header. And so if everyone creates information with their header, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to sign off on documentation, but share your snippet content. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into what will be our main and meatiest example of today. So I am essentially going to attempt to simulate how you might use TextExpander in an EMR. I'm going to cover a lot of features, a lot of advanced features in one example. So I'll try to stop along the way. Try not to go too fast for sure, but definitely write in the chat and stop me if you do have any questions. So again, I don't have access to an EMR. I wish I did. So I just have a PDF that I've created. Let me go ahead and pull that up here. And so yeah, essentially you will have something that's basically just like a notes field, likely when you're filling out patient documentation. So I'm going to expand this just to give you a preview so you kind of can have the vision of what I'm creating, because once I'm creating it in TextExpander, it just looks like a lot of bubbles and numbers. So you can kind of see the end result, so it could at least pique your interest, and then we'll rebuild it together. Okay. So I start here at the top of this PDF, and this is just kind of a very standard date of birth, gender, weight, height, ethnicity, just some really simple PHI that you might be entering. So I'm going to type in my abbreviation, which again is just that shortcut that helps you trigger your snippet expansion. So my abbreviation for this was hc.info. So then I have my temporary fill-in window pop up here where I'm basically just gonna run through this. So we'll say Jane Doe again. As you can see, I'm putting full name, date of birth. It's kind of gonna be in this order. So we'll say she was born 3/1979, female, 160 pounds, 5'6". All right. All right, so you'll see how very quickly I was able to run through that, and it filled out each section for me, okay? And then at the bottom here, this is going to be more representative of what it might look like when you are filling out maybe like a visit note or some more comprehensive information about this patient. So my abbreviation for this one is hc.note. We have this window pop up. Again, you're not going to see this every time in case someone is confused about that. This window only pops up when you have fill in the blanks to go through. So when it's a more simple snippet, it just quickly expands. Right, so I have month and year of last cancer screening. So I have basically a date picker. TextExpander doesn't have like a native function for selecting a date. So this is our best workaround for that. So we're going to say they were last seen for 2019. The results were positive, and so then we've got a diagnosis code here because if it was positive, we're required to enter that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When the next 6-month follow-up would be, any additional notes, which you can also make this bigger. And I could put a list of what their current medications might be. So maybe they're on ibuprofen and meloxicam. And then you'll see that that same medical credentials that I showed you in the My Information group, that sort of like licensing information is already nested at the bottom for me. So I'll select OK. And there we go. So it went ahead and filled everything out for me. So I'm going to, this is just a preview. I'm going to delete everything briefly. So after we rebuild it, we'll have space to re-expand what we built together. Okay, so I got a little ahead of myself before. I had already created this group in the beginning, but if you are following along, go ahead and create a new snippet group for the examples from today to live in if you want to. And I'm just going to name this oncology notes, for example. And the reason I also want to name it something like this is because I want you to also just be thinking of how you could be organizing your own snippet groups. It obviously really just depends on what your workflow looks like, but just as an example, I've seen this I've seen this be approached in a lot of ways, but I did have a pharmacy client where basically they made each group a specific diagnosis. Maybe yours would be more by broader areas of your business. It really just depends, but definitely be thinking of that. Okay, so I have this group, and now we are just going to add a new snippet, and we are just going to start building. So basically, I'm going to put case prepared. So we're going to build the note part, the oncology note part, and then I'll go back to the part where it just went through some basic patient health info. But the features are all pretty similar overall, and this one's the more advanced stuff. Okay, so case prepared on. So what we saw when I first expanded this was it actually was able to pull the current date and the current time for me. So these are called date and time macros in TextExpander, and you can access these in the first row of your editing bar. You should see a calendar icon. That one's going to say date macros, and then you should see time macros here. So yeah, essentially that's going to save you some time from pulling the current date or current time, and it can give you some really accurate documentation on when certain things were filled out. So I'm going to create a date macro for basically today. So I'm going to click on this date macros button, and essentially you're presented with a lot of options here. And I remember when I first started, this was really overwhelming to me. But to make it really simple, all this is doing is asking you to choose or decide in what format do you want the date to display? So you have options here to put the date numerically. Maybe you want it to display alphabetically. Maybe, this is something again, I said this in the beginning, I'm currently spending a couple of months in France. So many of you might know that they write dates differently. They put the month after the date, whereas in the US, we do it the other way. So just kind of decide how you want this to display. So I am going to keep it simple. I'm actually going to just do numbers. And so I'll put the current month and then a forward slash, the day, and I'm going to do double digits. I could choose just one digit, but I'll do 2 digits. And then I will do the year as 4 digits. Okay, if I quickly preview it, you'll see that this is accurate. It's 2/20/2024. All right, and I'm going to put at, and I'm going to put the current time. So this part, I'm going to come to the little clock icon. This is the time macros, as you can see as I'm hovering. So again, I'm just presented with formatting options. Do you want to present it as the 24-hour clock or the 12-hour clock, etc.? I will put the 12-hour clock, hour first. I'll put a colon after that. I will have it show me the minute. And maybe we can even get it to display down to the second. And then you can decide if you want it to simply say AM or PM at the end. Okay, so again, just to kind of help all these bubbles mean something, if I preview that, you'll see that it says 7:28:45 p.m. Again, I am in a different time zone for the time being. You can see in the top right-hand corner of my screen that is accurate. It's 7:28 p.m. for me. Okay, so moving on. I mentioned month and year of last answer screening. Just gonna format some of this text. Oh no. No, 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 no. Did I just delete all of that? That's okay. I have this built already, so I will go ahead and copy this part. Oh no, I didn't delete it. That's okay. So what I was trying to show you guys is I had previously mentioned that we don't have a native date picker. So above the date macro, it can pull the current date or time. And I'll show you in a little bit that you could also add a date or time in the past or future. But as far as just like being able to pull up a date picker and selecting some other random date, we don't have a feature for that right now. So the best workaround for that is going to be using pop-up menus, which is one of our types of fill-ins, to create a date picker of your own. Okay, so I am going to kind of just come after this text and I'm going to go to the fill-ins button on my editing bar. So this looks like a page icon here. Ideally, at this point, you are somewhat familiar with our fill-ins feature. If you're not, again, definitely encourage you to either do our one-on-one training or Jennifer hosts a lovely training that is fill-in specific. And so she really deep dives into each one of these options, but we will cover most of them today. So I'm going to use the feature that's called a pop-up menu. You are probably more familiar with this being called a drop-down menu, and that's essentially what it does. But in TextExpander, it's going to be called a pop-up menu. And you're going to be, after you insert your first pop-up menu, you have the name field here. So the name field essentially is just going to help you distinguish this field from what could possibly be a lot of other fill-ins in the same snippet. So you were just indicating to yourself or to anyone else what type of information is included in this menu. So again, I am just trying to replicate what a date picker would look like. So in this field, I might say this is the month. And of course, we have 12 months in a year. I'm not going to spend the time to put all of those, of course, today, but maybe you would just do something like this, right? Select OK. And then I'll do a backslash, and we'll do the same thing quickly, just for the year. And you can just kind of put as many years in here as you might think you need. For the years, this one is tough because there's so many options there. I actually think that something like a year that could go back decades, probably you wouldn't want to use that for this, but I have seen people really benefit from at least doing the month and the day part because that's obviously 12 months maximum and 31 days maximum. Okay, any questions, Jennifer, so far? If I missed anything?
Hey, sorry, my unmute wasn't working. No, everything's going really well.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. Okay, so next I am just going to put the screening results here. Okay, so we've simulated that date picker. You can kind of see here what that's going to look like again if I preview it. And so this next part, I am going to be trying to document essentially if their results were from their last cancer screening was maybe positive or negative. So for this part, I am going to use another type of fill-in that is called an optional section. So this is definitely one of my favorite features. It's very dynamic. And as indicated by the name, an optional section allows you to optionally include or not include a particular piece of information in a particular expansion. You'll see it again when we re-expand if you missed it before. How it's going to present is as a checkbox. So again, if you wanted to select positive in that instance, you would select that checkbox, negative, etc. It's also great for if you need to check all that apply situation, because the pop-up menu, this only allows you to select one choice from your list of options. So it can be really great depending on the scenario you're using it, whereas optional section is going to be more functional for you if you need to select more than one thing. So at this portion, I am going to come back to my fill-ins button. I'm going to add an optional section. And I am going to name it. Again, the name field when you are first creating a fill-in is always just you indicating what type of information am I putting here. With the optional sections particularly, we've seen this be really beneficial for people to actually use this to be instructional. So the name portion of your fill-in doesn't actually get included when you expand this patient note into your EMR, only the stuff that we are going to write after the fact. So this is really great for you explaining to your other colleagues or maybe the people you're managing how they can actually use this snippet. So in this portion, I'm going to say, okay, if it's positive, if there's an action required, which means you need to document. Why my caps lock isn't working? There we go. Diagnosis code. And I'm actually going to save myself some time to copy that, and I'll show you why in a few minutes. Okay, so you'll see, there we go. If it's positive, action required, document diagnosis code. That's something that you're going to see once you're expanding the snippet. But what actually gets included after the expansion is going to go in between these two brackets. So they kind of look like bookends. And so it's an optional section. It can be a bit confusing at first. So essentially, what is going to be included in your final expansion needs to go in the middle. So as you can see, I have placed my cursor here, and I am simply at this point just going to put the word positive. So directly after that, we just need an option for negative, of course. So I would just come to the fill-ins, add another optional section, put negative, or you can put negative screening, if you want to be more descriptive here. You do also have a default option when you're creating optional sections. Again, an optional section essentially is going to end up looking like a checkbox. So if you want to have something checked by default, it could save you time. So let's say most of the time you're filling this out and you have a negative result. That could save you a little bit of time. Otherwise, I would recommend just leaving that unchecked. And for this portion, I simply put negative. Okay. So now going to the next part. I am going to add another portion because as you can see, we've got to document the diagnosis code here. So what I'm going to do is add one more optional section. And this is a little power user trick a lot of people don't realize. The reason I copied and pasted the name of the last optional section is because I want these two to link together. Any type of fill-in you have, not just optional sections, if you name them the same thing in that name field and that first menu you have pop up, also if you need to ever change anything with the fill-in, you can double click it to get that menu to reappear. Okay, so I want these two to link together because I only want to check positive one time because I know that if the screening result was positive, I do have to document the diagnosis code. So these are going to link together, but the optional sections are the only fill-ins that are dynamic enough to the point where even though they link together, the content inside of them can be different. So in this portion of this patient documentation, again, I'm simply indicating that the screening results were positive, whereas on this portion, I want to document the diagnosis code. So I'm going to put completely different text on the inside of the optional section. So we've got diagnosis code. And I am going to use a different type of fill-in. We have so many, just a single line field. So we've covered this in previous trainings. Again, if you've been in our one-on-one, this is just a very straightforward free text box, ideal for just a single line of text, not more information. So I would just put here diagnosis code. Okay, I'm gonna select OK. And if I preview it, you'll see again, it's just going to give me a little text box, and all of this will come together as well once we're done building it and you can see it expand in action. Okay, so next I want to be able to more easily indicate when a 6-month follow-up would be due. Point of this part is to really just show you how you can actually have TextExpander expand a date in the past or the future. So how we have here, where I basically can also save us some time by copying this date macro, I can copy this if I want the format to be the same. Okay, so I'm going to paste this here, and I am going to place whatever mathematics I want to put in front of this. And you should see a calculation button and it says date and time math at the top of your editing bar. So if I click that, I'm basically just saying, okay, do I want to add or subtract years, days, months, hours, minutes, seconds, okay? In this case, I just want to quickly be able to see when a 6-month follow-up would be from the date that I'm filling out this documentation. All right, so you see add 6 months to the current date. Again, you could have done the same. I could have subtracted, I could have added any other kind of amount of time. Um, and just as another note, something that's easy to miss, if you were to have more date or time mathematics, or you wanted to add another date or time macro later on in this snippet, one thing you'll really want to make sure you do, going back to this calculation button, is to reset the date adjustment. Otherwise, if you don't do that, any other date that you put later on in the snippet, it's going to keep adding that 6 months too. Okay, so I would recommend that. And if I preview it again, you should see that it does say 8/20/2024. That is 6 months from today. Alrighty, so next we are just going to put a type of fill-in that is a multi-line field. So here for the diagnosis code, we used a single line field, and the best way you can think about this is how they're named. Single line field is best for a single line of text. A multi-line field is best when you want to put multiple lines of text. So that first portion was great for just a simple diagnosis code, whereas if you just want to freestyle and you need a large text box to simply put any additional notes about this patient, about the visit that you had with them, you would want to use a multi-line field that allows you to enter multiple lines of text. So I'll just put additional, I can spell, visit notes. And I'll select OK. And that's going to be inserted into the snippet, right? So just going to multi-line field from your fill-ins button. And next, I am going to show you how to leverage the optional sections. So again, this is the feature we've used for the screening results. And I told you that a pop-up menu, something like that isn't going to be ideal for putting a list of medications or a list of allergies because chances are your patient could easily have more than one or be taking more than one medication. And the pop-up menu is limiting in the fact that it only lets you select one choice. That's where the optional section is going to be more dynamic here. You can create more of a check all that apply situation. So I'm going to put current medications. And you would just come back to that fill-ins button, add an optional section. When I just want a clean checklist, I would recommend you actually do not name the optional section. I will go ahead and name the first one just so you can see the difference of why I mean this, but I'll say amoxicillin for that one. And then I'll select OK. And then again, the content itself that needs to be expanded in your note is going to go in the middle. So I'm going to paste that. And maybe I'd put like a dash before it just so visually this checklist looks very clean and easy to read. Okay. For the other ones, I'm going to leave them nameless. And I'm simply just going to put the name of the medication. A feature like this, I would actually recommend you create it as its own individual snippet. I'll show you what I mean, because you are likely going to use this list of medications or list of allergies, list of side effects. There's so many things I've seen healthcare professionals use this for. You're more than likely going to need it more than just in this one note. So with that, I recommend you use our nested snippets feature. I'm going to go to a different group and you'll notice that I actually already have this created. So, I mean, technically I could come in here and like copy and paste some of this stuff. It should work that way. Okay, so you'll see that you can copy and paste optional sections, but this isn't the most efficient way to do that. Maybe there is a scenario in which what I just showed you is better. You only need to copy and paste it one time, but the feature that I'm getting at here is a feature called nested snippets. So a nested snippet is essentially when you are nesting or inserting one snippet inside of another snippet. This is particularly beneficial for any information that could change. So think of something like this, a list of medications, a list of side effects. Something could get removed from this list, anything could be added to this list. So it's the type of information that's dynamic and possibly changes a lot. It is also the type of information that you are likely using in more than one area of your workflow. So instead of building this list of medications every single time, it's a lot more efficient, and we're trying to make you a power user here, to nest it in different places. And so what you need to do to be able to accomplish that is to basically create it as its own individual snippet. So I have this here. When you are nesting a snippet, you just simply need to know the abbreviation for the snippet you're nesting, and you can't make any mistakes for it to properly nest. So this one is hc.meds. So I could actually go back to where we were. I didn't need that. And I could delete this, and I'm going to come to the keyboard macros button, insert a snippet. And this is where I need to know the abbreviation, hc.meds. You'll see that it kind of just gives you a visual macro bubble. And if I preview it, that list of medications is there, okay? And so this is also the cool part. So let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or so things here. If I go back to that original list and I were to change something, I'm going to add one more optional section. And again, I'm going to name this because I wanted to show you the difference as far as how this is going to display when you are just wanting a very clean, simple checklist. So let's just do like a leave, for example, and then I will call this a leave. You'll see that it just kind of names it twice for no reason, even though this portion here is the only bit of text that'll actually be inserted in your final expansion. There's really no need for you to see the name of the medication twice. So that's just a little side note for my power users out there. Okay, so going back to where we were, this is also how cool nested snippets are. Preview it again, you'll see that that additional optional section was immediately updated. So again, when you need to make those changes, they happen and are displayed everywhere that you are nesting them seamlessly and automatically. That's going to be a game changer for you with streamlining your content. Okay, and let's essentially finish this example off with nesting one more snippet, which is going to be our medical licensing information. So we obviously know how to nest a snippet at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and nest it. But first I'm going to just say case prepared by, and then I will go to the keyboard macros button, insert the snippet, and the abbreviation that we created earlier was my license. You'll see that it did insert properly, but here's the part that I really want you to know. Nested snippets can also be really beneficial for large organizations if you all internally, so this does require some internal process alignment. So what you'd have to do is you'd all have to agree to create a personal snippet with the same abbreviation. So with organization snippets, for example, they would clash into each other if they were all having the same abbreviation. But when it remains in your personal folder, meaning it's only really accessible by you, it is not going to really interfere with your other teammates' personal snippets. However, I assume you all are sharing documentation. You have the same criteria you're trying to meet, and you might see the same types of patients. So in this example, if I was filling this out and my license is what's nested here, it is going to put my licensing information at the bottom of this document. Whereas, let's say Jennifer is also working with me at my practice, and she has a snippet in her personal folder named My License, and it has her medical licensing credentials. When she expands this oncology note, it is going to put her information there. So it does require some process alignment, like I said, but once you can do that, it can really be a game changer as far as getting more dynamic with your content and more efficient. Okay, so I think that is everything. If I have not made any mistakes here, we should be able to go ahead and expand this. Think, yeah, let's go ahead and expand it. Pulling this back up. So it is hc.note. Okay. Nope, that is not correct. That is not correct. I need to label this and put the abbreviation. So we'll just put oncology screening note, because I was going to expand the one that I had already created, and I want to expand the one we made together. Okay, so I have oncology screening note, and then I'll just go ahead and put an abbreviation for this. Maybe it would be onc.note. Okay, now I can pull this PDF back up, onc.note. All right, so we've got our temporary window pulled up here. Okay, so again, we've got just kind of gonna run through again the features that we just built together. So date macro at the top is going to pull the current date and the current time. Again, this is completely accurate for me. It is currently 7:50 p.m. to 2024. We've got the pop-up menu feature. Like I said, this is the best workaround for you to do a date picker. So I would say their last screening was long time ago. I'm 19, I'm born in this year, so I can tell you this was almost 29 years ago. Okay, so again, maybe not the most ideal to put it for dates if you need this many years, but it could be really beneficial to just put the day of the month in the month itself. All right, then we've got screening results. So as you remember, I told you that if you name an optional section or really any type of fill-in with the same name, they're going to link together. So watch that if this screening was positive and I select it, it selects it in both places, which is really great because I'm also saying that I need to document the diagnosis code, and it's going to go ahead and select both of these for me. If you haven't seen the optional section before at all, I was also explaining that this is the checkbox. So I can easily uncheck it and unchecks both of them. Anytime something is red, it indicates that that information has not been selected to be included in that particular expansion. So if the screening results were negative in March of 1995 when this person was last screened, you would just select that. So this is the kind of part that I've been explaining how dynamic this is, but let's go with positive. Action required. Okay, I need to document the diagnosis code. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the date and time mathematics that I was explaining to you. We can actually add 6 months to the current date. So it's going to add 6 months for February. So that'll be 8/20/2024. This is the multi-line field, which essentially gives you a bigger text box to freestyle, maybe some additional screening notes here. So maybe I would just put tumor found in this part of the body, whatever you might be writing here. All right, you can make this text box small or big, depending on what you want to do. And then we've got the optional sections to give us a checklist situation. I was explaining to you that if you do want to create this and you want it to look clean, this is a situation in which you wouldn't want to name the optional section, and you can see why. The portion that's highlighted red or green is the part that ends up getting included, but this is kind of just going to be messy when you're trying to go through the information, when it could just be clean like you see at the top. So I have selected 3 options, which means this patient is on acetaminophen. I'm butchering that, amoxicillin, and ibuprofen. All right, and then we have nested the licensing information at the bottom. Again, you're going to want everyone to create one of these in their personal group and align on the same abbreviation if you want to mimic something like I've made here. Right? Select OK. And there we go. It got inserted properly. So you'll notice, just to kind of quickly also go through the top, I had before as well this part where I just put their basic information. We have learned all the features in this already. Really, all you're seeing here is single line fields and pop-up menus, but the only thing we haven't seen yet is going to be this tab function here. So I just want to show you that is what is allowing you to tab between each field. So just to kind of show you how I built that, I'll go back to my original example, and it's called ht.info. So basically, this is called a keyboard macro in TextExpander. It is how you are able to tab between the fields very easily. You can set this up based on whatever software you're trying to use this in, whatever function you need to accomplish. So you do have to do some investigative work and really play around with this to see how many tabs do you need to get to what you're trying to do. But just to show you how I inserted that, I basically just kind of place my cursor where I need that macro to go. I come to the keyboard macros button and I insert tab. Okay, again, maybe I was filling out a form and I needed to tab to 2 fields down. I would put 2 tabs here. So definitely play around with that, but that is how I was able to move between those fields in the PDF, and you can definitely create something similar for your EHR. Okay, I know that was a ton of features. Do we have any questions? I know we're getting towards the end, so we only have a couple more features to cover, but this is the bread and butter of today. Any questions about what I just explained?
Hey, Ariel, nothing that's come through in the Q&A or the chat box. As a reminder, if you do have questions, feel free to drop those in there, but we are nearing the end of the webinar, so we will have that 15 minutes worth of Q&A time that you can ask those questions there as well. So far, so good though, Ariel, looks great.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, essentially, the only couple things even related to these examples that I would maybe show you that are little power user hidden tips and tricks is there is a show at top feature. So if we go back to this oncology note that we created, and I'll just go ahead and pull up the temporary fill-in window again. So ht.note, that was the original one. You'll see that you pretty much just see the full snippet and similar to how it looks when we created it. The show at top feature, what it does is it actually allows any kind of fill-in that you need to filter to the top of that temporary fill-in window that pops up. So you can quickly just run through the information. I'll just show you. So you saw what it looks like. To use this feature, you go to your fill-ins button and select show at top. And then pulling this back up, watch for the difference. Nope, that was the wrong one. I think I did that on the one we create. So onc.note. All right, so you can see the difference here that really what it did, it just filtered everything I need to fill in at the top. However, I actually just discovered this today. I don't know if you knew this, Jen. If an optional section doesn't have a name, it's actually not going to show here. So you have to be mindful of that. So if I use this caret, I can see that full optional section list, but because the leave was the only one that was named, it didn't actually show at the top. But there are situations in which this is really beneficial. You could always expand it to see the full snippet, but otherwise I would be able to just say, okay, this, and that. But again, I don't really get the information of like what this month and year was. So in this example, because of how robust it is, you might want to leave it the other way, but there are examples in which having those fill-ins go to the top can save you a lot of time. Okay. And group prefixes, I've really stressed how important naming and organizing your snippets are. That's gonna help you find the necessary information that you need, optimize your content library, and reduce the time that you spend accidentally expanding the wrong snippet. So an example of this would be how I named this abbreviation onc.note. We love to stress that it's really a great practice to name the prefix to be relevant to whatever the content of this group actually is. So Jen and I have prefixes. All of our emails start with em dot. In that special character portion, the dot is important because it's just preventing how much you accidentally expand your snippet. I once saw someone put just anxiety as an abbreviation, which isn't that beneficial because then if they just type the word anxiety, it would trigger text expansion, and yeah, you don't want that. So just to show you, you can set this up in the settings. If you go to the gear icon, and I would put onc dot here, for example. And so now it's going to automatically prepend to every snippet within this group. But I would only recommend doing the prefix in the settings if indeed every snippet within that group is going to be relevant and related to each other and would be a good prefix for anything that you end up adding. Okay, So, we are getting towards the end. So, just a couple of things. One thing I don't want you to forget is inline search. So, you could be thinking, how am I going to remember all of these abbreviations as my library begins to grow? You don't have to. Don't forget that we have a feature called inline search. Jennifer, if you don't mind just dropping those shortcuts in the chat for me. But essentially, if you're on a Windows, it's Control/, and if you're on a Mac, it's Command/. And what it does is it pulls up this temporary search box for you to be able to search TextExpander right directly in your EMR, or maybe you're writing an email, any sort of other documentation. You don't have to leave what you're doing and go into TextExpander, open the app, and find that snippet. You can just go here and there. So I can put ONC dot, for example, which is again why labels and prefixes are so important. And it's going to search the content, the label, and the abbreviation. I could hover over that snippet to make sure it is the thing that I need. And then I could click it, or I could use this temporary hotkey, or I can press enter, but I'll go ahead and do that. And then it's going to open up that snippet for me, and I could go ahead and expand it right here. So that's the most important, I think, hotkey I want you to remember. And yeah, basically, I think those are most of the features. We're about at time, but if anyone has an extra minute, don't forget to also peruse public groups. You can access them by going to snippets.textexpander.com or clicking on this plus icon here, and it'll take you to our webpage. Particularly for you all today, I encourage you to come to this medical tab on the public groups page. There is a lot of great stuff here. And if you aren't familiar, a public group is essentially a group that someone else that you likely don't know or work with has created and published for people in their industry to benefit from, or just people in general. So these are free game. Go there and see if there's anything you like. I've seen really amazing things like common medical abbreviations. There's 400 plus snippets in there. You've got different DSM-5 diagnosis code, medical abbreviations, etc. So this could also take some of that lift off of you from creating everything that you use in TextExpander. All right. And so yeah, we are about at time today. So I think I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Otherwise, I could talk to you forever about more features that we have, but I think that's about it. I guess we can go ahead and stop for questions. I know we've covered a lot, so I appreciate you all hanging in there. And Jennifer also is going to drop a survey link for today's webinar, so we would appreciate if you could give us some feedback. And until then, does anyone have any questions?